I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now with me, Ian Burns, managing editor, calling in from Ottawa. Good morning, Ian.
Howdy ho, mate. How you doing?
Welcome back to the work week. I'm doing well. Another strike, possibly. CN Rail now this time says it's signaling that they might go on strike on Tuesday. Just it seems like we got nothing but disruptions in our, transport of goods across Canada.
Yeah, and I mean, how crucial that is as well in Canada when, you really just have a couple of rail lines, and those are like the arteries of the whole country. And a couple of ports as well. And it's it's like the ports, the railways, and then a couple of years ago it was the highways as well, which is almost like
Yeah.
even worse. But
Hmm.
you'd think after the experience of the last few years, you would think that the federal government would set up some kind of emergency commission or something like that to find out why this keeps happening and how can it be stopped. Some kind of crack team to go out and stop it before it even starts. Because
Yeah.
this is so crucial to Canada, the Canadian economy, and everything about the whole country depends on these arteries.
Again, yeah, we live in the second largest landmass in the world, and we need to transport stuff from sea to shining sea, and that's why that compounding carbon tax has caused so much grief in our economy as well, because a lot of the stuff that we have to transport goes across our great nation.
Yeah, and it's the story of Canada. I almost like, I don't really know what they teach in history classes these days, but I feel like if you want to teach the history of Canada, like a top three element of the curriculum should be transport, because that's almost like that really is the story of this country. I mean, we've talked about it before. The only reason that British Columbia is in Canada is because the train line was built. That was the kind of quid pro quo for BC joining the Federation. So I just feel like it's so important. It's so crucial. And it's kind of like even things like grocery prices, which everybody complains about. It's almost all to do with transit costs. It's like it's at the heart of everything.
Yeah, and this is another story on the fentanyl. Canada is becoming a fentanyl exporter and a target for Trump, and we talked about that last week. And like about drugs increasingly manufactured and trafficked from Canada through the numbers remain small compared to Mexico. It's still a growing thing in Canada for sure, and something that we should take serious.
Yeah, well, it's this horrible new drug. Well, it's not really that new anymore, is it? But fentanyl, which has just like changed everything, hasn't it? It's not like the good old days where it had to be grown in like Colombia or Bolivia or somewhere back when it was cocaine. That was the drug everybody wanted. It was like you could have a handle on it a bit more. But now that fentanyl being completely synthetic, it can just be manufactured anywhere, including Canada and including BC, places like Falkland, as we saw recently. I think that they actually allude to that bust in
Hmm.
this Wall Street Journal article. I think it is the Wall Street Journal, isn't it? That
It is,
yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I
Um,
mean, we should emphasize it's an absolutely tiny fraction. It's less than 1%. I think it's less than 0.5% of imports into the US. It's so, so, so small. And yet I feel like the Canadian government is really missing a trick. Every time they mention fentanyl, the Canadians, like the federal government and the premiers, should scream back in the face of the Americans, what are you going to do about guns? Because they make up the vast, vast majority of all guns used in criminal activity in Canada. They come from America. When are they going to fix that? When are they going to pull their thumbs out of their rear ends and fix that crisis?
well, I think both Canada and the U.S. should strengthen our border so we could stop the flow of both of those things. Uh,
Definitely, but I think the Americans have more to do than Canadians, but we need to hear that articulated by our precious leaders.
We're facing our own drama here as Kelowna is cut off from the west side right now. The Bennett Bridge has been closed and will be closed for several hours as bomb experts probe a vehicle. And somebody's written a manifesto as well. And they have the guy in custody, I understand, Ian.
Yeah, they said that he was safely brought into custody pretty much right away. But yeah, we haven't actually in our story we haven't actually mentioned that weird manifesto thing because obviously the police haven't said that it is that guy or anything to do with that. But yeah, there's a manifesto going around that says exactly this will happen and that he's going to put explosive material inside of a car and seal the doors and a lot of waffle about how he was arrested, and it was it was, and it was an injustice somehow. But I mean, that's all at the minute. That's a bit kind of speculative, really. We need something. We need high confirmation from the police before we can start to report that. But it is out there.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Krakow, Poland, for the 80th anniversary of the Auschwitz liberation.
Yeah, and he mentioned October the 7th, that massacre a couple of years ago in Israel, which, the consequences of which continue to this very day. They're looking at hostage exchanges, aren't they? Or exchanging hostages for prisoners. Lots of drama in Israel about that still.
And he's lamented the fact that the rise of anti-Semitism here in Canada in the aftermath of that Hamas massacre. I mean, a lot of the stuff, there's been inaction on some of those things. And, a lot of people are calling for more action on some of these protests and that.
Yeah, I mean, he, like a lot of left-wing parties, or liberal, left liberal, whatever parties across the West, they're in a bit of a difficult situation after that pogrom in Israel, because they're trying to appease or, look sympathetic to two different factions within their party, which is, like Jewish people in the West traditionally would be part of the left-wing party, and that's certainly also true of Muslims and people from the Arab world. So they've kind of got these two groups in their coalition, and it doesn't really matter what they say, that they kind of upset one group every time. And Trudeau's tried that balancing act, but contrast that, if people that watch politics, you can contrast that with Pierre Poilievre's response, which is just unambiguous condemnation of Islamism and the sort of sick ideology that led to the massacre in 2023. And he's 100% backs Israel and the Jewish people to the hilt. And he's like chosen a side, really. Whereas Justin Trudeau, he's trying to seem like he's like, he's there for everyone kind of thing, but it isn't really working for him. And the same is also true in Europe and in England, for example. It's a challenge for left-wing parties, I think.
And then Arya says he's out of the Liberal leadership race as Carney gets more caucus support. And I mean, a number of different excuses that were thrown out there for explaining why he's not allowed to run, even though he had the money.
Yeah, and obviously, he's legit. He's an MP. He is a Liberal MP. It's not like he's some randomer. But yeah, a spokesman for the Liberals, who's quite active on social media, called Parker Lund, he came out and said that he didn't say exactly why, because for some reason decided to maintain a bit of mystery, but he did say that that he cited a rule within the Liberal Party that states that you can exclude somebody if they, something like if they can cause reputational damage to the Liberal Party or something along those lines.
Wasn't there a quote here that he's manifestly unfit for office?
Yeah, and that's another part of that.
But he's okay as a
rule.
Liberal MP? That's kind of like weird, no?
Precisely. Yeah, he's okay to legislate in Parliament and just, help decide how we all live in this country, but apparently he's not fit to be the leader. I mean, a lot of people have come out and said that it's a fix, basically. It's like a mirror image of the American Democratic Party, where they fixed it on 2 occasions to make sure that Bernie Sanders wouldn't win. Well, they made sure that Hillary beat Bernie, didn't they? And then they also made sure that Biden beat Bernie, and then they made sure that Biden left and that Kamala went in without an election. Like the Democratic Party, maybe we shouldn't compare the Liberals to the Democrats, because the Democratic Party is excessively corrupt, isn't it? But it's quite similar, the accusations that we're hearing from a lot of people anyway, which is that it's just a fix and that they want Carney.
It seems like a coronation. I mean, even the way he's speaking right now, he's already the prime minister. It's not like he's running. He's just speaking like the job is his. And interesting.
Well, he's also not speaking, isn't he? He's not really speaking to the press, which is another thing that somebody in power would do.
That's something worth discussing for a few minutes. We've seen in the 4 years in the Biden Harris administration, almost no access for press, right? Almost none. You have Trump come in, Trump and Vance, they're in front of the microphones almost too much. Even I think some of the reporters are saying it's too much. They can't even keep up. That and then Trudeau, the same thing. He sat down yet and done an interview with even our national media outlets since resigning?
Yeah, I'm trying to think actually. He did. I'm trying to think what his most recent one was, but no, he refused a lot of them, didn't he? On the
I I,
his explanation. His
I
explanation was
haven't
that, oh,
seen one yet.
I'm resigning.
Yeah, I haven't seen one yet. And I mean, the only one that I see doing kind of interviews right now is Chrystia Freeland.
Yeah, Freeland is everywhere. I mean, Gould's done a couple, and obviously Polyev.
Yeah, yeah.
Poilievre's been on CTV a few
I
times.
was speaking
Seems
of
to
the
like
liberals. Yeah,
CTV.
I was speaking of the liberals. Um, but
Yeah,
Carney's
but
been
he
running
was
away
kind of
from
dodge.
the
Polyev
press.
was kind of dodging the main
Yeah.
channels for quite a while, and he wasn't really doing very much. And he's, Polyev's actually a bit of a slippery character as well with the media. Like, he only ever really does things that he wants to do, and as we know from experience, refusing to allow us to interview him for nearly 2 years now. But with the Liberals, yeah, Freeland is definitely the busiest. But I guess that just all that does is it's more evidence, more circumstantial evidence that she's like the challenger and Carney is
Well,
the heir to the throne, and she feels this need to get out there, whereas Carney is like, he knows he doesn't need to, so he can
yeah,
kind of keep a distance.
but it raises the question of accountability, because I mean that's the thing that the press complained about in the U.S. Like, where's the accountability if the president never takes the podium? And the same thing for Justin. He rarely took the podium or allowed questions, even when he was here in Kelowna. We were allowed to take photos, but not dare ask a question. Otherwise, we wouldn't be allowed back in to even get a photo. So those are, how can you hold power accountable if you're not even allowed to ask questions or they don't give you any access to them?
Yeah, well, with Trudeau, there are many opportunities to ask questions, but it's just a very, very, very small group of journalists. It's the same journalists every single time, because he literally, the PMO, his bureaucratic outfit that looks after him, they refuse to allow people that they don't like into the press room to ask questions. They just don't let them come in, and they also choose the reporters each time. So you'll hear them say, like, you know, blah 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 from Globe and Mail every single time. They select the same people every time who proceed to ask banal questions that don't really challenge him.
This thing is shaking up the markets right now and shaking up the AI world. The China launched this thing on Christmas. AI DeepSeek is now the #1 app being downloaded. It's a new AI challenger to ChatGPT, and apparently they've done it cheaper and faster without a lot of NVIDIA chips. Although the guy I can't remember the name of the company, but he said that they may have had access to 50,000 NVIDIA GPUs. So we're not exactly clear on this, but it is causing some real fright in the markets. NVIDIA is down dramatically, as is a few other tech stocks that rely on these expensive chips. So interesting to see. I haven't had a chance. I tried to download it, but it begs the question: if they're worried about TikTok, all of a sudden there's a Chinese AI app that's being downloaded on everybody's phone. I don't know. I don't think TikTok is the one you need to worry about.
Definitely not. But no, like, supposedly this guy who runs DeepSeek, it's a really strange situation, because he runs the AI company, but then he also runs the hedge fund that put the
Right?
money up for the
Yeah.
AI company. So it's a bit of a weird situation. But yeah, apparently he hoarded loads and loads of NVIDIA chips before they were because there's an embargo now, isn't there? They can't actually acquire
Yeah.
them anymore in China. But he apparently hoarded loads of them and then blended them with, like, these really cheap Chinese ones that they still have access to, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I
NVIDIA
mean,
is
the
down.
money, the funds that have been cited blow your mind, really. It's like, I think $5 million
Yeah, I've heard
expenses or
six,
something
but
like
yeah.
that.
NVIDIA is down right now, 15%, down $22 on this kind of news. So, um,
Yeah. Well, like, the question I think that it prompts, that it makes you ask, is how much longer can the American um it's overheads, isn't it? How long can the Americans continue to pay the sort of money that they're paying to like uh, computer programmers. You know, they're paying people like five, six, $700,000 a year just to be an employee, like a mid-ranking or pretty like below mid-ranking employee at an AI company. How feasible is that really? When the Chinese can do it for the price of a five-bedroom house in Vancouver, the Chinese can make technology that's as good as like ChatGPT. The question then has to be, how long can they continue to pay these massive salaries, and how much, and they're based in places like San Francisco, which is almost like a broken city. It's not really possible to live in San Francisco. There are people that are paying like 3,000-4,000 US dollars a month to live in a wardrobe in
Mhm.
San Francisco, and then that kind of explains why the salaries are so ridiculously high. So I suppose the question is, it's about the fundamentals, I think, of the two economies.
Yeah, I think one of the other things it did really highlight for a lot of people, the AI race is real and there is no backing off because if the Chinese are going full bore, the Americans have no choice. That this is an all-out AI race right now.
Yeah, and Mark Andreessen, who's like a bit of a sort of guru in Silicon Valley, isn't he? And I think he's now described as an advisor to the Trump administration. He said that this represents like a Sputnik moment, like another
Yeah,
Sputnik moment for the United States, and that is obviously when the Russians kind of humiliated the Americans, didn't they? And was it the 1950s when
yeah,
they
yeah.
produced a satellite that they showed that they could create technology that the Americans couldn't, and that was like a shocking moment for the Americans. So I don't know. Let's see, because a lot of people are really wondering, like, how good are the Chinese really? How advanced are they? And
Again,
moments like this
I would,
suggest they are very
if
advanced.
if you're a Star Trek fan, I would say that in there they would play the role of the Ferengi. They watch technology and they know how to duplicate it cheaper, better, and faster, right? And they're pretty good at it.
Yeah, I would almost suggest Romulans as well, like very
Mm.
secretive and very
Mm.
advanced, and you don't really know how good they actually are because
We're
they
all
hide
living
it
in a
all.
matrix, and the movies are just playing out in front of us.
Yeah.
As funny as that seems. Um, this one it developed and ended like really quickly. Almost a trade war happened as the Trump administration started sending back those mass deportations, and they were sending back criminals, and they were using military aircraft to send them back, but they were turned back. They said they refused to take them. And then Trump said that they were going to do a bunch of trade tariffs. And the next thing you know, the Colombian president said that he'll even send his own presidential plane to pick up the people, and that he would accept them.
Yeah, it's on the face of it rather humiliating for the Colombian president, that isn't it? But I think the Americans can do this kind of thing because they're the most powerful country in the world. They have the world's reserve currency. They have the biggest economy in the world, etc., etc. So they can throw their weight around and do things like this. But then I guess the question is, to what extent is that going to suffer from diminishing returns? Like at some point, they're going to lose friends, really, aren't they? And Colombia, pretty much, I'd say, Colombia is the Americans' most reliable ally, next to maybe like Chile historically, most reliable ally in South America. So it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's a slap in the face of a friend, really.
Yeah.
And that's kind of this is the thing with the Trump presidency that I struggle to understand because he's kind of making war against his best friends. Like obviously the best friend the Americans have ever had next to the British are the Canadians. And
Yeah.
here he is slapping the Canadians again and again and again. It's like I think that could backfire. So it's really interesting to watch anyway, and it's one to
It,
keep an eye on.
they did react quite quickly. There was that statement from the press secretary basically saying like these are the rules. And there was you can go to that next slide there. Um, yeah, and the reaction was quick. Like even though I think Alexandria Ortiz Court, AOC, had been saying that this is going to drive up the price of coffee, but the thing was short lived. Like it didn't age well. Um, it was over in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, and like you haven't exactly got the Americans over a barrel with coffee anyway, because lots of countries produce coffee. You can like theoretically the Americans. I don't know what happened in the back channels, but the Americans might have just said, "Okay, well we'll just buy it from Kenya or something then. See you
Yeah.
later." It's not like coffee is unique to Colombia. And their other big export, which is flowers. Like, I mean, come on, you can get flowers anywhere. So it's not they weren't in a very strong position, the Colombians. I mean, not to mention that they basically rely on the American military for all kinds of operational
Yeah,
assistance as well.
and I mean they were sending back their citizens, right? I mean that's the other thing. They were sending back the citizens that were illegal in the United States, and these ones were criminals. So I can see why they wouldn't want them
Yeah.
back.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of been that happened with Mexico, didn't it? And Trump 1.0, and he wasn't quite as like sudden and quick as this, but they had a similar sort of dispute, didn't he, with the Mexicans back then?
And Justin Trudeau, the resigned Justin Trudeau, is pulling again, doing some of the stuff that the last minute stuff that Joe Biden did with the Democrats, is stacking the Senate before he leaves.
I mean, it kind of threatens a bit of a constitutional crisis, this, doesn't it? If he's going to appoint people who have been accused of being partisans, I mean, he's already been accused of that over his sort of 10 years, 9.5 years in charge, 90 or whatever appointments that he's made. He's been accused of politicizing the Senate in a way that really nobody else ever has, a prime minister anyway, or in modern times. So it threatens a constitutional crisis because a lot of people ask the question, quite rightly, like, what's the point of the Senate anyway? Like, what even is the Senate? Like, a lot of people really don't like it, and an unelected upper chamber. It's not exactly a popular entity anyway, is it? So doing things like this, I think it's just going to make it even less popular. Really, I'm not sure it's such a shrewd move.
Well, gets people a job, I guess. It says he's stacking it with well-connected Liberal Party insiders and personal friends. I didn't make the list again, but
that's really outrageous, isn't it? I can't believe that. Passed over again.
Passed over again. And then we talk about Mark Carney, who is not taking, like doing media sit-downs yet, but they're saying that like here's this guy that they're putting forth to be the prime minister, basically coronating him, and without a single vote. And he's now, I think he put out a really polished video saying he's a Canadian, has lots of hockey stuff in it and everything, and how much he's a Canadian. But we just watched a clip where he said he is a European, so a man of many nations.
A lot of people as well now are like whispering in the background, asking the question of like, where does he live? Where does Carney actually live? Like, where's his primary residence? Is it in Canada, or is it in Europe somewhere? Is it in New York City, where his wife supposedly lives for at least part of the year? So that's going to follow him around anyway, for sure. That this idea that he's kind of, a bit like Ignatieff. That was the same with him, wasn't it? Where it's like he was deemed to be this fella that had just come back because he'd been in the US, hadn't he? And he'd been in Britain for quite a long time. And he just kind of popped up back in Canada to lead the Liberals. And that really that didn't serve him, did it, really, in the election? So they're going to have to address that. And I think, to be fair to them, on a PR sort of level, they've done actually quite a good job by, the way that he went to Edmonton. He talked about being a youngster in Edmonton, and then there's that picture of him playing hockey as a young gun. Like, they have done the PR, they've got it out there, but they're going to have to answer the big questions as well.
I mean, there's people coming out and saying, that they're calling him names, they're calling him carbon tax Carney. I think that came from Pierre Poilievre for sure. That's that next slide there. But he does say that the carbon tax makes Canada more competitive. I've yet to see the proof in that. I mean, we see our economy that's been based around this carbon tax, and our economy is definitely not competitive right now.
Yeah, it defies common sense, really, doesn't it, to suggest that? But if he's going to argue that, then all power to him. Let's hear what his argument is, I guess.
And then another Liberal leadership hopeful, Ruby Dalla, for PM. She's now saying that she would like all the people that were going to vote for Arya to vote for her.
Well, she's like, I mean, anybody that's been on Twitter, I don't know if it's also true on other social media sites. I don't really use any of the ones other than X, but Chandra Arya became almost like a meme. for a lot of people that don't like the Liberal Party. They wanted him to be the leader because they thought it was funny, basically. And now as far as I'm aware, the hive mind is it's trying to decide whether to back this woman here, Ruby, or to back Chrystia Freeland, because they think that one of those two is the worst possible candidate. So I mean, and I think we're going to talk about it later anyway, aren't we? Like how easy it is to register. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's it, and I think they're looking at Ruby as the like meme candidate that they can try and like artificially boost.
Ian, did we lose you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. How's it going?
What did you last hear me say?
You were just saying that Ruby, I don't know what you were saying actually. I got lost too.
Well, I'm just saying Ruby is like the meme. The people that don't like the Liberals, they're behind Ruby because they think that she's. I mean, it's harsh to say it, but they think she's the worst candidate, either her or Chrystia Freeland, and they want the Liberals to fail. So they're trying to hype her and like get her in. This isn't unusual though. A lot of people like if you look you look throughout sort of the history of the party system in the US and in Canada as well. A lot of opponents register with the other team to try and sponsor bad candidates. That's been going on for quite a while, and yeah, I think it's that kind of that old idea, but in the internet age, really, and it's.
I like her logo better than Carney's two attempts at a logo where he copied other stuff. So there's that.
Yeah, everybody loves the leaf. It looks like a bit like it looks a bit like the McDonald's sign or something, doesn't it? It was just like a leaf thrown on there.
Well, you can forget about that $250 check you were counting on. That is a no-go.
Darn. Well, yeah, it's going to be a lot of disappointed people.
You're going to have to redo your budget.
I love as well how it's like that's you just can't mention that now, can you? It's almost like the people that mention that, the few journalists who've mentioned that, just similar as well in BC where people sometimes still mention the $1,000 check. It's almost like you've like used a naughty word or something. Like the way that they look at them, it's like, oh, what are you bringing that up for? Like that's a little bit impolite. It's like, but you promised this like 5 minutes ago. You promised this, and now they're trying to pretend that it's just been swept under the carpet, hasn't it?
And then our friends at Heinz ran a full-page ad, and I'm sure the newspapers love that. They get a little bit of some revenue there. But people are saying they should send the bill to the Prime Minister who made the misinformation on saying that it's not Canadian. So, that is my favorite ketchup. If I'm going to have ketchup, it's got to be Heinz. Otherwise, I'm just not eating it.
Is there actually a Canadian-owned one, though? I mean, that would be one better, wouldn't it? If there's one that's actually made in Canada by a Canadian company with Canadian tomatoes. That's the next step.
My daughter makes her own catsup, so there you go.
Well, she needs to get that out there and advertise it.
Less sugar because ketchup has a lot of sugar in it. I mean, I think that's why people like it a lot. I think it's the amount of sugar in there, and I don't want to get this wrong, but there's a lot of sugar in there. I don't want to spread misinformation, but I do know there's a lot. There's a lot of sugar in
the
there.
Federal government. Unlike the federal government, we can't afford a team of fact checkers, but they can, and they still got it wrong.
And we talked about this, and I don't belong to a party, but I did sign up to be just to get their information. I am now welcomed into the Liberal Party of Canada, and this is what they sent me. As a part of the Liberal Party, they're going to lower the cost of living. Well, they've had 10 years to do that. I don't think they've done well. They're going to accelerate our fight against climate change. I think most people would want that to go the other way. But see, that's still something they're pushing, right? The carbon tax.
Yeah.
Grow a stronger economy. God knows we need that, but they've had 10 years for that as well. Strengthen our public health care system. Again, 10 years of that. And we need, we have people dying in waiting rooms. And then make our communities safer again. They've gotten, I think we're ahead of the Americans now in crime in certain areas.
Homicide, yeah.
Yeah, so I think a fail on most of those things for the past 10 years. And the question I have, though, is to the Liberal Party, if we were allowed to ask the question of Carney, is how are you going to accomplish all this change that you're calling, but you're the man of change, when you're running the same characters? Like, it's the same cabinet, it's the same players. Like, I don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, and they're rightly being asked that question. And that is why Mark Carney is trying to present himself as the outsider, because the insiders are unpopular.
Yeah, but the
And
outsider is one with the same group of insiders. But he was the one advising them on all economy, especially. And and he says that they're going
indeed,
to grow the number one economy in the G7, and I just don't know, because isn't the United States in the G7?
certainly is, yes.
So he's going to grow it to be stronger than the United States economy. Like, that would be a magic act I would love to see.
Well, they were making that claim based on an old forecast that Canada's forecast to grow faster than even the US this year and next year. But the IMF released a forecast. I think it was last week, wasn't it, or quite recently, that put the US ahead of Canada. So they're gonna have to put that forecast to bed now, and they're probably not going to talk about that. Maybe in future they'll say one of the fastest growing in the G7, or something like that.
Even the seventh place would be one of the fastest growing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. But I find it funny, this list that you've got here, because
Not
you
my
know,
list, by the way. Not my list. They
well,
sent
yeah,
me
this
the
list
list.
that you've inserted into the document so that we can look at, so that we can peruse. That, I mean, call me a cynic. I call myself a cynic, so I'll accept the label. But just look at that list, right? Anybody that's been following politics, anybody that's been following surveys, you know, by Leger and all the rest of these companies that pump out surveys all the time. This list here it's all related to the top 5, top 10 issues of concern in these polls. I think it almost seems like too transparent. They've just looked at the list of things and they thought, all right, well, we'll appeal to those things. Like we're gonna put 5 things down. Let's do the top 5 from all these surveys over the last 6 months. It just seems a bit phony, really. And they've also changed their tune. It's like it's this isn't what they campaigned on in 2021, really, is it? Not, it wasn't on these principles, and it just feels a little bit kind of, astroturfed, as they say. It seems a bit fake, and it seems. I think it might put quite a lot of people off,
I
which is
don't
true of a
get
lot of
where
their PR.
I don't get where, because even the Liberal MPs now are talking, including Chrystia Freeland, that are talking about energy and how we need to build pipelines and that now. I don't know how that fits in there, accelerate our fight against climate change. I don't know how they managed to fit that in there, because they've been working really hard at suppressing our natural wealth. And then all of a sudden that's still in there. And then they're talking about how, like our energy is so important.
Well, they're
It
trying to
contradicts itself.
speak, just like with the Israel-Palestine thing, they're trying to speak out of both sides of their mouths to two different sets of people. They're trying to tell the climate lobby within their own party that they're still the climate change party kind of thing, and then they're trying to tell people outside of the party who are sick of the carbon tax and who question the wisdom of, for example, telling the Koreans and the Germans and the Japanese that we can't give them LNG. They're trying to say to them, "Oh yeah, look, we understand. We understand how important our natural resources are now." So they're trapped, and I mean, this isn't uncommon for a party that's been in power for 10 years. But I mean, it doesn't change the fact that it's happening. They're trying to they're trying to sort of be all things to all people, and historically that doesn't really work.
Yeah, let's move on to markets. Gold off quite a bit this morning. Everything's off. Like, the markets are off in general. Gold off. Still kind of like pounding around that range, though. Like, still in that range. So we can expect it to kind of like stay in that range for a bit there. It looks like it's running out of steam a little bit. Bitcoin sold off quite a bit too in this NVIDIA kind of like this deep the Chinese AI stock.
Deep Seek.
DeepSeek. I lost that name for a second there. Must be losing my mind.
You need to download DeepSeek.
I need to, yeah, I need something. But yeah, Bitcoin sold off as well, and then our dollar just hanging in that 69-cent range there, just hanging in there, kind of basing along there, waiting for something to happen. You know what would be interesting is, I don't know if anybody's asked, like I haven't seen the question being asked of Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney, or like the other hopefuls there. Would they call an election? Because I think a lot of Canadians want an election. Would they call an election? I think they're still actively trying to work the other parties to get an extension in October.
Yeah, that is a good question, and I haven't heard them. I haven't heard that being asked. To be honest, I haven't heard an awful lot from Pierre Poilievre either, or certainly not from the NDP or the Bloc Québécois, the other opposition parties. I haven't really heard them. They're not really making that their number one issue. For Pierre Poilievre, it's still the carbon tax, isn't it? Over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, forever and all time. Endless carbon tax. That's all that's like his entire campaign. And then the NDP, it's like, the usual stuff about oligarchs and CEOs and stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of like they're not focusing on an election, whereas I feel like the majority of the Canadian people probably want that. Yeah.
I think that Pierre Poilievre needs to start putting out some of his platform ideas of what he would do differently, because I think that's important. I mean, Donald Trump went out yesterday that's got a lot of, it was just like, it's almost Elon Musk-ish, where he just says, what if we get rid of taxes altogether and just charge other countries tariffs? I mean, just think of the American reaction to that, right? And they're just like, yeah, right? Like, yeah. The Liberals promised us to get rid of the GST. Remember, that was way back with Jean Chrétien, no?
Long time ago, yeah.
So they got rid of it on
income tax as well. Didn't used to exist. It's important to mention that is a relatively novel tax.
They got rid of it on tinsel and taco chips, and for 2 months. I mean, why doesn't one of them come out and say they're going to get rid of the GST permanently?
Well, Gould has said that she'll get rid of it permanently on a handful of items.
On the tinsel and taco chips again, these are just like nonsensical things, and you're $250, and just, these are all gimmicks, right? But why not some real policy?
Yeah, it's like trying to give the impression that you're going to change things in a big way, but really you're going to maintain the status quo. Whereas it's harder to do that now that we're looking at the Donald Trump presidency, and they are really trying to change things, aren't they, in a massive way? And it's kind of, and this puts Pierre Poilievre in a difficult position, because you're right to say that he hasn't really fleshed out a lot of his plans. And I think he's tried to do the Joe Biden and then Keir Starmer style of campaign, where you just kind of don't do anything. You just repeat a few slogans and cliches, and you just try to not say anything and let the other guy screw it up, and then just slip in without having made any promises. And I don't know, that's becoming more complicated for Poilievre, because the Liberals are about to put Carney in, it looks like to me, and Carney is not Trudeau. He's nowhere near as unpopular as Trudeau, and in fact, he is actually a bit more astute than Trudeau, I would suggest, and more sort of liked. Well, so he's going to have to adapt to that. And then also the example of Trump down south means that Poilievre is, there's a risk that he's going to alienate his own base, because it looks like he's kind of soft and he's not a man of action compared to Trump. So I would expect changes from him.
Trump's getting heroes welcomes wherever he goes, it seems like. He walked into a casino in Las Vegas he went there and did a rally after being inaugurated, and because he ran on no tax on tips, and I mean they were just chanting his name and everything. And he's done quite a few things he's set out to do, including, we don't have it in the storyboard, story load this morning, was that he's rehired all U.S. military that were fired for not taking the COVID vaccine. And the big one, he's given them all back pay.
Yeah,
full reinstatement of benefits, full back pay, and so that hasn't happened here in Canada, and that's a big one. That was another thing that he just immediately did. The no tax on tips things he talked about. and there's a lot of things. And then the deportations have already happened, are happening right now with the criminals that are being moved out first.
Yeah, it's actually weird. It's really weird to see a politician actively honor his promises. And he's done it in like he's doing it in quite obscure things. Like he recognized this Native American tribe or something like that, which is kind of like not really. A lot of people say it isn't even actually a tribe, but he said he was going to do it, and he did it. It's kind of like, that's one of those things where he's not going to try and get reelected. This is a tiny group of people who he could theoretically easily betray, but he hasn't. He's kept his promise, and certainly with the border, which he went on and on and on and on about, that was like the cornerstone of his whole campaign. It really does look like he's honoring that promise.
There's active duty troops there. There's the Navy has aircraft there. They're building fences. Like a lot of stuff is happening. Like there's a journalist that joked. I don't know if he half joked or whatever. He said there must be a board in the back there in the White House there where they've got the list of to-dos, and they just walks in there and says, "Let's do this one today, and let's do this one today," and they're just ticking them off. I mean, we're not even. What are we? We're not even like 7 days out.
Yeah, it's extremely strange, I must say, because even Trump himself, the first version of Trump, he abandoned loads of promises that he made in the 2016 election. Number one of, I would say, was he promised to prosecute Hillary Clinton, as many of us can recall. And then I think it was like week one, might even have been like day one, he was asked about that, and he was like, "Nah, not bothered about that." It's
I think
just like, okay.
I think he was mired in the swamp last time, and this time there are definitely a lot of people that are on his side. Like I said, he's getting heroes welcomes where he goes, and I think maybe that's a lesson for Canadian politicians. Make a list of what you're actually going to promise Canadians, not this ambiguous stuff about things that you can't prove. Just like tell us what you're going to do, like on either side of the thing, and how you're going to pay for it. Like let's get to the meat and potatoes of this.
Yeah, but it's kind of dangerous for politicians in the rest of the democratic world. They're put in a very sort of difficult position, and that's what I mean about Polyev, because the world's most powerful and important and influential democracy, the United States, is showing that this can happen. This can be done. You can literally, like, as I've seen, a meme on the internet now is people just write the sentence, "You can literally just do things." That's become a meme now, because for so many decades, politicians have said, "We're going to do this." Then they get into power, and it's like, well, you can't just do that. It's like you've got to go to this court, and then you've got to have this like tribunal set up. You've got to do this committee, and now people are seeing that no, actually, you can just do things. You can make a promise to do something and just do it. Obviously, there are different political systems in Canada and the US, and the president has a huge amount of power, but the Parliament, the Canadian Parliament, is extraordinarily powerful. So if you've got a majority in Parliament, you can actually just do stuff. So, they're going to have to. Everything changes as usual with Donald Trump. Everything changes because of him.
And I say that it's Elon Muskish, because if you ever watch an Elon Musk investor presentation or one of his master plans, he'll take questions from the audience, and somebody will say, "Why don't we do this?" And he'll like, "Sure, let's do that." And the next day it's done. And he'll just turn on it. Even so, when he bought X, somebody said, "Can you buy X to save the world?" And he's like, "Yeah, I can do that." It's just like, and I think a lot of the stuff that I can say, like a lot of stuff that Trump has promised, he's delivering on right now. So I'm probably driving some people crazy, because I imagine they'd hoped to mire him in the swamp again so that he couldn't get anything done.
Yeah, and he's doing some things that are really unpopular, like pardoning the January 6th.
Yeah. Another promise that he made, done, right? Another promise.
Yep.
Done.
And also RFK, who now, I think today or this week, he's having his hearings in the Senate.
But also released.
He was another one where Kennedy literally just said, like, he's made me a promise that he'll give me a position in the administration, but I mean, I don't know. Let's see. He might break that promise, but he hasn't. He's kept to that.
He's said that he would release the RFK and MLK documents, and those are supposedly going to come out the next few days here.
Yeah, that's he signed the executive order, didn't he, last week?
Yeah. Anyway, moving on more in the markets. Key earnings announcements. Big week coming up here. AT&T, like a lot of stocks to to report, including Tesla is going to report on Wednesday, Microsoft, a lot of these things. A lot of the stocks, a lot of them are down right now. So earnings will definitely change the direction or accelerate the direction right now. But a lot of them about to report here. This is earnings week coming up. So there you go. A lot of the four of the big seven are going to report, and that's Apple, Meta, Microsoft, and Tesla, right? So the Magnificent Seven all set to report earnings. And this is, you might know more about this. Israel flexes energy and military strength amid record natural gas exports and production. There you go.
Well, they found the Eastern Med. They found quite a bit, like near Cyprus, and this is a cause of conflict as usual. I mean, not like they need any more causes to hate each other, but this is a cause of conflict between the Turks and the Greeks because they kind of maritime borders are really like complicated and weird, aren't they? When like deciding where the border should be, where the line should go, they're kind of arguing over that gas field in the Med. But Israel, they've just sort of quietly got on with it, and they're just doing it. I mean, it's not like that much. It doesn't put them in. I don't even think they're in like the top 20 or anything for reserves or production. But it's a tiny country, Israel, so a little bit of gas goes a long way. And they're also exporting it to Egypt, which is very, very interesting, I think, when you think about the like historical animosity.
But I'm just saying, like, like Canada is the natural resources beast that's been shackled. And here we are, lots of small players there are, like unleashing their energy and enjoying that wealth that's produced from it.
Yeah, and look how they're doing it as well at sea, which is like the hardest way to do it.
Yeah.
Canadian gas isn't at sea; it's obviously on land, so theoretically should be easier to extract.
More on this DeepSeek hits markets, and it's really hitting the markets, and it puts ChatGPT on notice. I mean, we talked about it, I think, on Friday. ChatGPT launched Operator, so it remains to be seen like where these things are at, right? Like, I mean, I haven't used DeepSeek yet, but I think I'll try to get it using today. We are going to hold an AI conference here in Kelowna on Thursday. If anybody's interested, we're holding at the Laurel Packing House. It'll be a half-day thing, and we'll definitely get into DeepSeek and ChatGPT and the rest of them out there. And then it just, like the next thing just shows you a chart of how these things perform on basic things. So, with this DeepSeek, the big thing on this DeepSeek is that it's done for a lot less money. And apparently we don't know how much NVIDIA chips or how many NVIDIA chips are actually been employed when they were doing it. So it is an open source model though, as well. Whereas, Llama, Facebook's model is open source as well. So that'll definitely, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. The AI race is real. That's 100% that we know that the AI race is real. And then with China nipping at the heels, that the Americans are going to push more and more capital and energy towards it and minds towards it, right? To make sure. I'm sure Elon Musk, I don't know if he's commented yet. I haven't looked at his tweets, but I'm sure there'll be a comment coming from Elon Musk because he has Grok that he's developing as well.
Yeah. But I think the broader question that this raises is, the whole kind of the whole assumption of the 21st century, or like from the American perspective anyway, it's built on the idea that America will be superior in technology to China, but China will be superior in manufacturing for various reasons. That's kind of the assumption of our time, and this threatens to flip that on its head. Because if the Chinese can innovate like the Americans or even better than the Americans, then what does America have? Like what's the basis of its power in the long run? It's like you can see why people are freaking out about it because it threatens to upend the world order.
Well, the two things that America still has that they dominate at is the U.S. dollar, and then also the U.S. military. Those are the two big things. And China's building its military as well,
but both of those things, the U.S. military and the U.S. dominance of the sort of financial system, they're both consequences of the American economy being the big boy. And the American economy depends on innovation. So you can see why in the long run that would threaten to undermine the Americans' position. But I mean, the other thing that the Chinese don't have is natural resources. They do have quite a lot of natural resources, but they don't have enough oil. They don't have enough gas. I don't think they even have enough farmland. So they import the necessities of life, whereas the Americans largely export them because they just have them in abundance. So
I just
that's the other strength the Americans have.
I just took a peek. The bridge is still closed, obviously. I just looked out the window there, and I could still see the police lights there. Um, I like that somebody emailed in and said, "Email me when the bridge is open." Just like, okay.
That's a nice service that we could provide there.
Your friends in the UK drive forward as the biggest European EV market. So the UK is definitely Europe's top electric EV market for the first time, following soaring EV sales. A lot of these are being like subsidized as well, though, right? Around that 381,000 or 382,000 EVs were sold in the UK in 2024. I mean, gasoline is very expensive, as you can attest to, in
Totally.
jolly old England.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it even is now, but it's extraordinarily expensive. Let me take a look. So it's looking like it's a little over sort of like $2 a liter, or around about that now, at the moment, anyway. But the problem with this for the British is their their sort of power infrastructure is among the absolute worst on earth. I mean, certainly among the developed nations, they have the most expensive energy in the world, pretty much. So I mean, I don't know how they're supposed to make this work, but it's because they've got like crazy laws in Britain, like mandates where similar to Canada's, where basically you're going to be fined, or you're going to be you're not going to be able to flourish as a company unless you sell EVs. So that explains it, I would say.
And then lastly, we have our meme for the day. Again, jolly old England. You must be influencing this a lot. Oh, no, we had that one more chart. You can put that one up there. Sorry, I missed that one. The Tesla Model 3 coming in as the cheapest car to operate in of all the cars on an annual basis. The Model 3, the cheapest car. And I can attest to that. In 2 years, I've been driving a Tesla. Zero maintenance. No oil changes, no nothing, other than you change your winter tires out, and washer fluid. There you go.
The shame is that it's not far away from being the cheapest one to buy in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah. And then our meme from England. Again, that is from the Babylon Bee. Their 007 is now going after grandmas.
Inaccurate meme. No, I mean, I laugh, but this is one of the saddest things, in God knows how long, many, many decades in Britain. This is one of the saddest things. They passed a lot of absolutely garbage legislation in Britain that criminalized basically being offensive on the internet. And obviously a lot of people might say, oh, offensive, that's not good. But I mean, in some cases, it's just nothing. It's nothing at all. And they also have these bizarre laws on the books in England where you can be the police can come and knock on your door and interview you and record something called a non-crime hate incident, which is so Orwellian and crazy that it would blow your mind. I would advise people to read about it. But basically what it is, somebody could so I could report you, Jim. I could call up the police in England and say, this guy, Jim Check, he made me feel really uncomfortable. I think he was being racist towards me because I'm English. And that's my perception. I don't have any evidence. There's no video. I don't have any witnesses, but Jim Check did this to me. And then the police could come to you and record on your file forever non-crime hate incident, that you were involved in a hate incident. So if you went to apply for a job or something, it would pop up and say, Jim Check, non-crime hate incident. It's like, it defies belief. It's absolutely insane what they're doing in Britain. And
well, they were trying
that's why this meme is quite funny.
Similar laws here in Canada that didn't get very far. I mean, it doesn't say they're not going to try again, but to censor the internet even more so.
Yep.
More than Germany, Bill C-18 has already done.
Yeah, it was going to be the Online Safety Act was going to be nuts. I mean, that was the one. It's Holocaust Memorial Day today, actually, so it's a strange time to mention it. But that was the one that was going to give people life imprisonment for questioning the accepted facts about the Holocaust. Like life imprisonment. I mean, that blew a lot of people's minds. But that was also going to give judges the ability to preemptively restrain somebody who they think might post something offensive on the internet. Yeah, but I mean that's dead and buried, that law now, I think.
Yeah.
But a lot of countries are doing it, and obviously the Germans, like we highlighted Scholz, didn't we? I think it was last week, the Chancellor of Germany, who said that you can't just go posting anything you like on the internet. For example, advocating for right-wing policies. The Europeans. The Europeans they sometimes just seem like they're living on another planet. Really, they're in an alternate reality.
Well, there you have it. That's our show for today. We do ask you to subscribe. You can follow us on YouTube, TikTok, X, our newsletter, which we send out 365 days a year, every morning before 7 a.m. And of course, you can visit the website all the time, KelownaNow.com, and Facebook and Instagram. Maybe we'll get it back. That's another question that somebody should be asking the hopefuls, Carney and Freeland, and that's why we're trying to get an interview with them too, because we'd like to know what their position in this new and improved Liberal Party is with Bill C-18, which has basically hurt all media, and then even the funding going ahead. They shouldn't interfere with media at all. They should let media do its own thing and allow it to be independent, and again, give us back the audience that we earned over the past 10 or so years.
Yeah, though I wouldn't count on it being any different, because I think the Liberal Party has almost made it a policy of the party that they're kind of like the party of the mainstream media in a way, and CBC, like the defenders of the CBC. So,
well, then
I wouldn't count
party.
on it.
I'd say you can make that more accurate by the saying then the party of the chosen media as opposed to the media.
Yeah, well, I said mainstream, but that almost doesn't mean anything anymore, does it? In this age, I guess legacy media is probably one of the best descriptions.
But even some of them were shut out. It's basically the chosen. Some people are getting the funding, and some people are just getting choked off. So there's that.
Yep, and the people who are being punished the most, and I'm like, I hate to say it, I'm very sorry to say it, but the people who are being punished the most are the people that are often punished the most in Canada, which is like the small independent outfits that try to do things a bit differently. And I think that's not just in the media where those people are punished. I think that also applies to business. all sectors of business. Yeah,
we saw that in COVID. Which businesses stayed open? The large conglomerates. Which ones were closed? The small independents.
Yeah, and the rules were often set up in such a way that it actively punished the smaller businesses that had smaller smaller properties and didn't. I mean, similar with this GST thing, the smaller businesses that didn't have the resources to, just like type in a few lines of code to fix their tills so that it would take the GST off certain items. But it's the little companies that suffered there.
Yeah. Anyway, that's it for this morning. We'll be back here tomorrow, and we also have Gavin Dew from the BC Conservative Party. Going to talk about the BC government here. And then we also have Renee Merrifield, former MLA for the BC government, with Beyond the Ballot. That'll be tomorrow morning. And then Ian and I will be after that. So it'll be a full morning. We'll probably have a couple hours of live streams there. And with that said, we do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local,